G'day, Geoff Lewis here from Seriously Series, and welcome to another Patreon exclusive video. Now this one is very special, and so special in fact that obviously you guys and girls who've been supporting us on Patreon are going to get it before anyone else. But I will be releasing it on YouTube in a week's time. The reason being is this is a very momentous occasion, as I've finally got back a virtually brand spanking new 2.25 litre petrol engine, and I'm going to be telling you what vehicle that's going in and some of the twists and turns that the team at Galloway Engines have actually put into this motor. So make sure you sat down with a cup of tea or something stronger, because it's going to be a very interesting video as always, so stay tuned. And here it is. This is a 1975 Land Rover Series 3 2.25 litre petrol engine. Now this is very different to the early variant because it's got 5 main bearings on the actual crankshaft as opposed to 3. Now it looks like a work of art, and it really is. And when it came to deciding whether to get a motor rebuilt for the Series 3, I looked at whether I'd do it myself or whether I'd have to get someone else in. And sadly, time constraints for myself were too great. I just didn't have the time to do it. And now looking back on that decision, it was the right decision to make. I've never rebuilt an engine before. I've had a lot to do with them and stripping them down and putting new bearings in for the crankshaft, main bearings and all the rest. But I've never completely rebuilt one from the ground up. And I'm really glad that I got Dave and the team at Galloway Engines to create this. It literally is a masterpiece. Now I'm not going to tell you how much it costs because that's irrelevant. If you look at getting an engine rebuilt, it's going to obviously change because it depends on how much work and how much effort you want to actually pay to be put into that motor. So go out there and find your own quotes. I'm being nice about it, but I advise you to do that because prices do change and quality changes too. Now, first of all, why would I rebuild an engine or get an engine rebuilt? Well, I did a big trip late last year, early this year, in the Land Rover Series 3. And in nearly 1,800 kilometres, it burnt through 5 litres of oil. And that was pretty thick, viscous oil too. I think it was 2060 that I was using. And I didn't really know the history of the motor. I knew that it ran okay, but I could tell it was pretty tired. And I didn't feel comfortable going out doing another great big trip into the interior of Australia with the possible chance of there being a calamitous engine failure. And probably the worst, I would say, would be spinning a big end bearing. So a bearing actually on the crankshaft, or even worse, snapping a crankshaft, which isn't very common in these engines because they are very well made. So I just thought, look, let's bite the bullet and let's get a motor rebuilt. The other reason is it was really struggling power-wise. I had to work the motor a lot harder to keep it up to speed, to sort of compete with traffic, or just to maintain any kind of dignity in traffic. And because of that, you burn through more fuel. And fuel economy is a big problem out here because it's very big distances in between fuel stops. So that's sort of why I went down this road. But the other problem was actually trying to find a motor to rebuild. Now, I was very lucky. I was able to pick up 3 or 4 motors from a deceased estate here in Kalgoorlie, but I wanted one that was actually in a Land Rover Series 3. And luckily, when I bought the Land Rover Series 3, the short wheelbase, I actually got a second one with it for spare parts. And this actually had a motor in it, minus the cylinder head. And so I thought, oh, right, I'll pull that block out, because the other motors that I'd got from the deceased estate were all early variants of this motor. So being a bit of, I guess, purist, you could say, it doesn't actually fit the Series 3, because it's obviously 3 main bearing when the ones in the Series 3 were 5 main bearing. The compression ratios are different too. So I had to try and actually get the block out, and that wasn't easy either. But I got it out and I found it was seized, and in another video I showed you how I actually was able to free up the motor and bring a bit of life back into it. The second problem was that I found that the pistons inside it were, I think, 4 thou or 40 thou oversized. I may have that wrong. And I thought that this was as large as you could possibly go. So I thought, far out, if I want this to work, I'm probably going to have to get liners or sleeves put in, which is generally what you can do. And that's not cheap at all. So I was absolutely amazed when I found out you can actually get 60 or 6 thou oversized pistons that will actually go in it, and that's Land Rover specified too. So whoever ends up inheriting this engine down the track is either going to have to put liners in it, or they're going to have to throw the block away, because basically it's been rebuilt probably at least 4 times. This will be the 4th time that it's been rebuilt. So I had the idea in place. The second thing was, where on earth am I going to find a place out here to get it rebuilt? There's nowhere in Kalgoorlie anymore. But luckily there's a fantastic Facebook group, and this is where social media, I see, is used in a very positive way. There's a great group called West Oz, and many of you are probably watching this video, and if you are, thumbs up to you, thank you very much. I put a little post on there asking if anyone knew a good mechanic or a good mechanical workshop that would be able to recondition or rebuild a motor. And they came back with about 3 or 4 different places that I could actually go to. And I went through and I called them and I said, oh look, I've got a Land Rover this, and they went, what? And I went, okay, not much luck there. And then I called Galloway Engines and I said, oh look, I've got an old motor out of a Land Rover, it's 1975. And he said, oh, that's not old, that's a new one. We do Bentleys from the interim war period, the oldest motor we've done is 1901. And I'm like, I found the Holy Grail. And he's like, yeah, we've got the pistons in stock, we've got this and this and this, we do Series 1 motors and we send them off to the UK, we do it all. And I was just absolutely amazed. I was like, this is just brilliant. And so I said, oh look, I've got a block, but then I've got some cylinder heads. And I went through and I picked out the best cylinder head and I put it on. And I said, and I've sourced some other bits, is that okay? And he's like, yeah, sure, that's fine, no worries. And I'm like, great. And then I put it in the Parenti and drove the 900 kilometres, of which I got caught in a massive thunderstorm along the way too. But anyway, ended up getting there just in time after knocking off work, and was able to leave the block with them. And 6 months later, this is pretty much what we've got here. Now, I know I'm probably boring some of you to death, but many of you Land Rover enthusiasts watching this video, or classic 4x4 enthusiasts, hopefully you're enjoying it. But when it came to rebuilding the engine, there was a couple things I could have done. Now I could have just kept it bog standard, and I could have tried to cut corners where I could, but I figured it's not going to be a cheap exercise, so let's just go all out. And as I said to my wife, I'm never going to own a new car, so this is the closest thing I'm ever going to get. That's a great way to explain the bill when you get it. yeah, a lot of quiet evenings. But what I decided to do, and what I asked about, was actually trying to make the motor slightly more efficient. Now these are never ever going to be a performance engine. They're never ever going to, go in dragsters and all the rest, but there are little subtle things that you can do to make it a bit more efficient. Now one of the things that I asked was with the crankshaft. I said, is it possible to balance the crankshaft? Now, by balancing a crankshaft, if you think about it, it means that it's even, and it means that the pistons can actually spin more freely. Now, if you don't believe me, sit cross-legged like this, or one leg underneath you, and do that for about probably an hour, and then get up and see if you can sprint down the road. You won't. You'll be hobbling along barely at walking pace. But once you're warmed up, you can fly on down the road. It's exactly the same here. You need to have that balance. So I got Dave to do that. The other thing that Dave insisted on, which was something I didn't think of, was getting the flywheel at the back here balanced too. So that means that everything in it that's rotating is pretty much balanced. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head whether he balanced the conrods or got them the same weight. I believe he did, but I stand corrected there. So that was something that was suggested there. Now, moving up the motor, we've obviously got the camshaft that runs right through the side because they're a side cam, and then you've got push rods that go to the top. Now, camshafts are where you can actually get a lot more out of your engine, but you do have to be careful. And I like to obviously use as many Land Rover parts as possible. So these motors obviously began in 1958. They were starting to be fit in the Series 2 Land Rovers at the end of 1958, I believe. And obviously they started out as a 7-to-1 compression ratio. I think it must have been 62 or around about that sort of year that they went to the 8-to-1 compression ratio. And then it really didn't change much the motor until about 1980, and that's when they went to a 9-to-1 compression ratio. And what they also changed was the camshaft within it. Now this camshaft was also used in the 200 TDI, and obviously the 300 TDI also sheds a similar block to this, slightly modified in its casting, and bored out obviously instead of 2¼ litres, but bored out to 2½ litres. So basically, to cut all that back, I've put a camshaft out of a 200 TDI or a later Series 3 2¼ litre petrol engine in this. And from the research that I've done, you can basically keep the timing relatively the same, but it gives you obviously a little bit extra performance. It allows the valves to open up just that little bit more. So these are all small little things that have been done to it, but increases its efficiency. Now the cylinder head itself, there is a company in the UK that I won't mention, but I did approach them because they do a very good high flow head. And basically, and I hate to say this, they were incredibly rude on the phone, and they weren't helpful at all. They just didn't want the business, so I was rather disappointed in that. But once again, I keep plugging it, but it's because it's a really good business. Dave and the team at Galloway Engines were able to do that. I mentioned what I wanted, and I said I just want to be able to get a more efficient head. I don't want to necessarily port the cylinder ports or the inlet or exhaust ports. I just want to make it more efficient if we can. And he said that's fine. He said what he usually does is he goes in, they go in and they take all the imperfections out of the casting, because it isn't steel, it's iron. So you've got little divots here and there, you've got little bits of not slag, but little knobs of iron which restrict the flow of the fuel going in and the exhaust gases coming out. So they're able just to clean it up a little bit and just make it a bit more efficient. The other thing that I got fitted was obviously hardened valve seats. Now this means that I can run unleaded petrol without the additive, which is actually really, really handy. Now many of you might disagree and say just don't bother running the additive, but I'll tell you now, some motors love the additive, some don't. If I don't put it in the Series 2, it runs rough as guts. If I put it in, it's as balanced as a singer's sewing machine. So, you know, it's got nothing to do with our egos, it's just fact, not fiction. So obviously that pretty much sums up what I had done to it, but I've got a 3-page invoice of everything else that's been done to it, and it is extensive. The oil pump has been completely rebuilt. There's a spring washer in there which someone had kind of, I guess, butchered a bit just to make it work. That's all been pulled apart, all genuine parts have been put in. The colour of the engine, they were able to actually find a sample of the original colour behind one of the engine mounts and actually matched it and then sprayed it up as you see here. And whether it is or it isn't, I think it's just a really nice hue of a colour. One other little tip I'll tell you about is actually in the cylinder head itself. They actually replaced the rocker shaft, and this actually runs along obviously the top of the cylinder head here. Now this is one of the reasons why I'm really happy about getting a professional to actually rebuild the motor, because I wouldn't have done that myself. The reason why they replaced the rocker shaft is over time, obviously they wear slightly. And by putting a brand new rocker shaft in, and new rockers too, this meant there's no slop, and it actually makes the engine run a lot quieter. You don't get the rattles and the vibrations. Once again, making it smoother, more efficient. So, you know, fantastic. And just, I'll admit, when I got the bill, it was very expensive, but then when I came and actually saw it, I'm like, worth every penny. Every single bolt has a little yellow dot on it. And the reason why it's got a little yellow dot tells me that that's been torqued up to the right specifications. Everything on the whole entire motor, around the sump, the engine mounts, where the oil filler is, just everywhere. It is just a thing of beauty. Even the spark plugs, where the spark plugs go, they've got little plugs in there to stop grime and grit getting in there. But this is only one part of the project, and I'm going to talk about what we're going to add onto it to give it even more get up and go. Rightio, so obviously this side is where a lot of the action happens. Here we've actually got where the exhaust ports are, and obviously the inlet ports. So what does that mean? Well, this is where the carburetor sits, and this is where the exhaust manifold sits. Now, as many of you know, I've already fitted a set of extractors to the Series 3, so that's going to bolt straight on. I then also had made up a sports exhaust, you could say, that is 2 inches all the way through, so that creates better flow. Now, courtesy of James Williams and the team at HMJ Engineering, I've been able to get a very, very interesting piece of kit. HJ Engineering do some fantastic pieces of kit, mainly adaptions and modifications for series Land Rovers. And what they actually offer is an SU carburetor kit. And this means basically you use the same inlet manifold, but you have a couple of adaption elbows and plates that actually fit onto it. And this means you can fit a carburetor that basically had war-winning potential, because we all know the SU carburetors, or SU, built the carburetors that went onto the Merlin and obviously the Meteor engine, which was used in the Spitfire, the Hurricane, the Lancaster, the Cromwell, and the most famous of all, the Centurion main battle tank. And the SU carburetor of choice for this, which is recommended, I've managed to purchase a brand spanking new one here. Look at that. Isn't that a thing of exquisite beauty? This is a HIF 44, and I believe that this was fitted on the Mini, probably the Mini Cooper, and I think 2 of these were fitted onto the Triumph Stag, so British pedigree right there. And oh, to see it in the flesh, it is just so wonderful. And I actually feel really, really guilty. I'm just going to put that down there, because I'm going to have to put it on this engine and it's going to get covered in dust and muck and all the rest. It's horrible, horrible. But when it comes to carburetors, nothing beats an SU. So that is going to be fantastic. And obviously I'll be covering how to actually fit that, and obviously how to tune it, because they weren't made for these engines. So we've got to find the right needle, and then we've got to obviously adjust it so we can get the most out of it. Now on the other side of the engine here, you've obviously got where the distributor goes, and we don't have one. I did contemplate using the distributor that's already on the Land Rover Series 3, but that one's electronic, and I'm just not much of a fan. I know many of you are out there, but we travel to some very remote locations, and frankly I can't fix a little electric modular unit, whereas I can easily fix a set of points. I can even use a hacksaw blade to get the right point, right gap, or I can get a point file out and get a bit more life out of them. So on this side we're going to fit a brand spanking new distributor, which I'm purchasing from, I think it's called Cypress Rebuilt, and these guys have a lot of very good and genuine new old stock Land Rover Series parts. You can actually even buy Land Rover Series 1 engines from them. So we'll get that, so only the best for the engine. But anyway, that pretty much sums it up, and I've probably prattled on a little bit, but many of you who have made it to the end of this video, good on you, and obviously you're probably die-hard Land Rover enthusiasts and classic 4x4 enthusiasts, as I said earlier. But this is something else, and it's all thanks to you guys and girls out there. Some of the proceeds from our, obviously, people who've contributed via PayPal have gone towards this. And obviously Patreon too, and I just want to talk a little bit about that now. Moving forward, what we're hoping to do is obviously we'll be fitting this into the Land Rover Series 3, and by we I mean myself and obviously friends and that will be coming around to help me do it, because I can't do it all on my own. But the proceeds, as I said, have gone to partly to this engine, because it is an expensive undertaking, but a lot of the proceeds from our PayPal contributions from people and obviously Patreon we're putting aside, and we're putting aside for our big trip next year, where we're looking at driving from the interior of Australia, or what I call the true centre of Australia, Uluru or Ayers Rock, depending on what school you went to, and driving all the way down on no tarmac, all the way down to the Australian Bight. And we'll be tackling the longest road in Australia without a permanent water source. And this is why you need to have reliability on your side. So that's where the proceeds are going. So there's more to this channel than just a few odd YouTube videos popping up now and then. The contributions that you make, and even though those of you out there who have recently subscribed to our channel, it makes all the difference. So I really do implore you, if you are enjoying the content here, do check us out on Patreon. You don't have to sign up, it's up to you. But just check it out, see what you think, and if it's for you, it's for you, and if it's not, it's not. But you can do it as little as $1 per video, which is $4 a month. So that's, a cup of coffee. It's not much at all.
And many of you out there I know don't like it, and that's fine, and you can support us via PayPal on our website. So this is what it all goes to. It's not just, you know, paying for beers on Friday, which it doesn't go to that at all. But anyway, thanks for watching, and look, I hope you've got something out of this video, and at the very least I hope it may have inspired yourself to tackle that next project. And I really hope that everything's going well for you out there with your projects and adventures and all the rest. And as always, I hope to see you in our next video.